Live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Shonali Bassick.
And I'm Tim Stanovic. Welcome to the first Bloomberg Crypto Show of 2025 as we look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
And this year is shaping up to be a potentially historic time for the crypto industry as President-elect Donald Trump and his pro-crypto stance take office.
In just a moment, we're going to speak to our first guest of the year. It's Ripple President Monica Long. This as the company releases its stablecoin.
And MicroStrategy's Michael Saylor, he's at it again. His firm buys Bitcoin for a 9th consecutive week, and it now holds around 44 billion of the digital token.
All that ahead over the next half hour on Bloomberg Crypto. First, though, a snapshot of the market so far this year. Yesterday, we did see Bitcoin pushing above $100,000 for the first time in the year, first time in about 2 weeks. This as a rally in stocks at the start of the week really bolstered demand for these riskier assets. Today, it's a different story, not so much. We're seeing a risk-off mood across equities and across crypto. Bitcoin is down today, though still up over the last week by about 4.3%. And after a record-setting run last year, Bitcoin may be due for a downturn, at least according to the latest MLive Pulse survey. So we asked Bloomberg News readers on the terminal and online which winners are most likely to turn into losers in 2025. Look at this, 39% said Bitcoin. It's a larger share compared with those who chose Mag 7 stocks, that's at 25%, or 20% rather, China bonds at 25%, the US dollar at 15%, Shonali.
And meanwhile, we're going to talk about something else linked to the dollar. Ripple launched a new stablecoin called RLUSD, and it's now available on a number of global exchanges. Ripple President Monica Long is joining us now to talk about it. Interesting move by Ripple, of course. Can you explain the relationship between the new stablecoin and XRP and how you expect it to evolve?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So the Ripple stablecoin is a one-to-one dollar-pegged token. And so it is really about facilitating things like payments. The majority of what we have focused on at Ripple is enabling cross-border payments that are faster, always on 24/7, lower cost than more traditional means. And so stablecoins like Ripple USD really facilitate that for our customers. And XRP, it continues to be, a native token on the public blockchain, the XRP ledger. And so that token is also very useful for fast payment transactions on that blockchain.
Does this create competition with XRP, though? Are you concerned that with this new stablecoin, folks will be less interested in XRP?
We see them as really complementary to one another. So dollars can be a very effective means for payments, and we have seen that demand from within our customer base. Over time, we facilitated north of $70 billion in cross-border transactions through our payment solutions, and we've already been using stablecoins as a part of that equation. XRP is it's the native asset to the blockchain, so it's used for things like transaction fees on the blockchain, but then also can be a bridge asset to trading different tokens on the XRP ledger. So we really see the two playing complementary roles.
Speaking of bridge assets, I'm wondering what this means for on-ramp, off-ramp transactions when it comes to new stablecoins for cross-border payment users. What does the new stablecoin really solve? Is there a real reason at the end of the day you felt the need to go in this direction?
Yeah, so the stablecoin market today is, more than $150 billion for US dollar stablecoins, and it's projected to grow to $3+ trillion over the next few years. So this is a market that is exploding. And you just mentioned a key use case for on-ramping and off-ramping into, the blockchain universe from the fiat world or the traditional world. And so we think that the market is continuing to grow and expand. And so having access to compliant, reliable stablecoins, that's the most important thing in a stablecoin, is that it has to be stable and you have to be able to trust the issuer to keep it one-to-one backed. The Ripple US dollar is regulated by New York Department of Financial Services. Their regulation is really seen as kind of the gold standard globally in terms of how rigorous they are with their framework. And so that is, I think, a reason that especially regulated financial institutions will choose to use Ripple US dollars for on-ramping and off-ramping into the blockchain world.
Monica, as I was preparing for this and reading about this announcement, one thing that struck me was the fact that some of the biggest exchanges out there are missing from this announcement. So right now, this is available on Bitso, MoonPay, CoinMina, additional listings coming on Bullish, Mercado Bitcoin, and others. What about a huge platform like Coinbase and others, for example? When does that happen?
We are continuing to expand distribution and availability of Ripple dollars on other exchanges. So I think you can expect to see more availability, more announcements coming soon.
How soon?
Imminently.
Well, we'll look out for that. What about in terms of adoption? How big do you expect this to get in the next year realistically? I mean, do you have a baseline kind of projection on how big it could get based on the adoption you're talking about with clients? Do you think large institutions are using this? Who's using it?
So, I mean, if we look at the crypto landscape overall, I mean, it has certainly been, the market's been growing in the past couple quarters. And, we think that this year is going to be a big year for crypto overall. And so demand for stablecoins, we think will grow along with that. As you mentioned, I mean, it's really the way to on-ramp and off-ramp. It's also used as a key asset in trading. So we think that the market's going to grow tremendously over the course of the next year. Our demand from within our client base, our business doubled within payments last year. And so we see a really strong growth trajectory for our payment solution. And with that, Ripple US dollar will have a premium role.
Monica, what about other asset types? You've seen a lot of interest when it comes to ETFs tied to cryptocurrencies. A lot of questions around whether you could see an ETF tied to spot XRP. What kind of discussions are you having with people about this? Do you think we'll see one soon?
I think we will see one very soon. I think that we will see more, various crypto spot ETFs this year coming out of the U.S. And I think XRP is likely to be next in line after Bitcoin and ETH. There's already been a number of different companies like Canary and others who have filed. And so we think, especially with the administration change, and that the approvals of those filings will accelerate.
Hey, Monica, before we let you go, a very basic one when it comes to Ripple USD versus XRP. Lay out for us who each of these are for.
So both are openly available to users. So with Ripple US dollars, we see growing institutional demand. Within the world within our customer base for Ripple payments, I mentioned that, and we work with primarily regulated payment service providers and other financial institutions. We also work with a lot of banks. We are a custody provider through Ripple Custody, and they are some of the biggest banks in the world are really interested in providing tokenized asset services. And so with that, US dollar stablecoins are really important to facilitate those use cases. So we see, institutional demand growing for Ripple US dollars, and alongside XRP as well. And as the crypto market expands overall next year, I think there will also be a growing retail need for dollar stablecoins in trading.
Ripple President Monica Long, going to have to leave it there. Monica, Happy New Year, and thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg
Thank you
Crypto.
for having me.
Now to some crypto stories that caught our attention this week. CFTC Chair Rostin Benham plans to resign from the role on January 20th. He advocated for legislation to make the agency the main Bitcoin regulator and give it oversight of cryptocurrency exchanges.
And speaking of the CFTC, Gemini Trust, which was co-founded by the Winklevoss twins, agreed to pay $5 million to the agency to end a lawsuit claiming it misled regulators in a bid to launch the first U.S. regulated Bitcoin futures contract. The settlement was approved Monday by a district judge.
And MicroStrategy continues to buy up Bitcoin, but not as much as we've seen in recent months. MicroStrategy bought $101 million of Bitcoin. It's the 9th consecutive week of purchases, bringing its total Bitcoin holdings to around $44 billion.
And what I wonder is if they don't buy on the 10th month, they don't buy on the 11th month, what does that say for risk appetite? Of course, yeah.
Well, is it saying that the price is too high?
I don't know, but 9 in a row is hard to walk away from. Not to mention they've been raising billions of dollars behind it, Tim.
Okay. We'll see what happens. We'll see how the story keeps going. That's the question I have.
Yeah, we will certainly be following it on this show. And coming up next, we're going to talk about more places money is going. BlackRock's digital token BUIDL is now available on the Wintermute trading platform. We're going to discuss with the CEO of Wintermute next. And to talk about all the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg.
BlackRock's first tokenized fund called BUIDL is expanding after its launch last March. Wintermute has become the first firm to offer over-the-counter trading of the BUIDL token. Let's discuss what's next for BUIDL and more with Wintermute CEO Evgeny Gaevoy. Evgeny, good to see you this afternoon. Where is demand coming from for BUIDL? Why open it up? Why do you choose, like, when you see opening it up and offering it, who are you offering it to? Who do you see as the target here?
Hi, and thanks for having me. It is quite interesting because it's a pretty wide range of actors interested in this. First of all, it's basically everyone on the institutional side. What BUIDL offers is basically access to treasury, well, effectively treasury type instrument, but on chain, which allows effectively those institutional players to use this as a, well, no pun intended, but as a building block for the expansion into more like crypto native markets. But and then on crypto native side, it is very interesting for players like centralized exchanges, for example, who can offer BUIDL as a collateral asset on derivative trading platforms like Binance, OKX, Bybit. And if you go even deeper on the crypto native sides, you can look at fully collateralized lending protocols who can effectively enable BUIDL as one of the collateral assets so people can borrow against it.
One important aspect of this, too, is how much you believe investors are looking at more overlap between the traditional financial system and the digital financial system. Do you think things like BUIDL, we were just talking to Ripple about the stablecoin industry, are these imperative for crypto to be expanding further?
Not too much. I think the long-term bet for, well, a lot of people in this space is for traditional markets and crypto markets are effectively merging. And basically traditional markets borrowing some of the best features of the crypto markets, like 24/7 trading, general composability between different dApps and different assets on the blockchain, on different blockchains. And effectively, before we arrive at this future, we need to, well, basically BUIDL specifically needs to establish itself as an asset that there's basically ample liquidity, so it can be used as a collateral, so it can be used as, well, basically across different protocols, across different exchanges. That's basically exactly where Wintermute steps in because, yeah, as we are uniquely positioned to service, all those potential and existing BUIDL users.
Yeah, Evgeny, I'm wondering about institutional demand for crypto this year. And similar to what Shonali was talking about when it comes to the traditional financial system versus what we're seeing with fintech and digital, I'm wondering how much growth you see happening when it comes to institutional demand this year. Like how much white space is there?
Yeah, I think there is a lot. Basically, I see a massive unlock in the Trump administration coming into power. I see a pretty big unlock and changing in leadership of some of the key regulators in the US. Honestly, all we've seen last year is Bitcoin and Ethereum. We still yet to see a lot more ETFs being launched on different, on basically different cryptos. Yeah, we just talked to Ripple, but we also see quite some interest for assets like Solana. And so I do see a lot more ETFs being launched. I see a lot more interest both on institutional side of things, where basically yeah, both retail and institutional players will get into those ETFs. But I also see a lot more experimentation in the real world asset space, where a lot of the real world assets will make their way into crypto space and effectively will be used not just within the US, but globally.
Right. You know, one question I have about this as well is I want to kind of rewind to the first Trump administration, where you did see a wave of initial coin offerings. You remember that, Tim? We saw that IPO or ICO.
Some stronger than others.
Surge. But at that time, there was a bit of a crackdown, and there was an SEC that was very critical about this. You know, you are seeing more institutional options for both institutional investors as well as retail traders. But do you think, Evgeny, that we can see also a boom of tokens being launched, initial coin offerings that, and some that might start to take advantage of the retail trader once again?
Honestly, we already see it. Like there has been a massive boom in meme coins, for example, last year already. I think what's interesting is not necessarily rewind back to ICO era, but more about this merge between this initial stock offering and ICOs, basically making sure that the tokens that are launched in a more compliant manner, that they're launched with certain protections in place or maybe certain disclosures in place so that it's more safe for retail users to use. I think we'll see a lot more experimentations and hopefully a lot more openness on the regulatory side of things to enable more while keeping it safer compared to 2017.
Yeah, certainly a lot to keep an eye on. And of course, weeks away from inauguration, that is Wintermute CEO Evgeny Gaevoy. Now coming up, FTX assets are still around the world up for grabs. Its European assets were just acquired by Backpack Exchange. We're going to discuss that with the company's CEO next. This is Bloomberg. Backpack Exchange has acquired FTX's European assets valued at around $32 million. Backpack Exchange was founded in 2022 by a former FTX employee. We're going to bring in Backpack Exchange CEO Armani Ferrante. You know, the $32.7 million that you paid, really that's what the original founders paid to buy it back from the FTX exchange. Why was it worth this much still?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the big opportunity that the FTX unlocks for us is, I think today we all know that the global derivatives market accounts for something on the order of 75% of crypto trading volume worldwide. Within that, there's really one product that is responsible for a lot of that volume, and it's perpetual futures, which does something on the order of 100 billion volume every 24 hours. And if you take a look at what's been happening over the past year, really the world's largest crypto derivatives exchanges have all left Europe. And so what we're left with today is one of the biggest markets in the EU, one of the biggest products in perpetual futures, and quite literally no exchange that's able to offer it direct to consumer in a regulated and compliant way. And so there's this quite literal hole in the market that we're looking to fill. And so we're super excited about the prospect of bringing crypto derivatives trading volume back to Europe.
Before you do that, though, you have to return customers' funds as soon as possible. You told our team we're not going to serve a single user, a single trade in the EU until we have the ability to return customers' funds. When will that be?
That's exactly right. So it's important to acknowledge that there's many factors at play here, many parties at play here, not just Backpack. But with that said, it's at the top of our priority list. As you said, we're not going to serve a single trade in the EU until we have the ability to return customer assets. And Backpack will be fully ready, we expect, by February. So we're going to be ready to go. And yeah, that's about our timeline.
I want to talk about lessons learned here as well. Given that you formerly worked at FTX, when the FTX downfall really ensued, you had this new wave of a crackdown in the crypto industry. You saw pricing really fall off before coming back last year in a way that maybe a lot of people don't sit here at near new all-time highs, frankly, remembering. What are the lessons learned as we enter another wave, especially in the US, of lighter regulation in the crypto industry?
So Backpack had about $14.5 million stuck on the exchange at the time of collapse. The moment was really a crucible event that kind of is embedded into our core DNA. And when we started the company, namely when we started the exchange, we really set out to solve a lot of these problems. And what's pretty interesting about the collapse of FTX is that, well, a lot of people point at it as an example of the perils of crypto. But what's pretty maybe nuanced about that point is that it's not really an example of the perils of crypto. It's really an example of the perils of these more traditional, opaque, and brittle financial institutions that really cryptocurrencies, whether it's blockchain technology, multi-party computation, or zero-knowledge proofs, really all the modern techniques that we use in computer science to build these systems, was really purpose-built to solve. And so, I think we're really excited at Backpack to be able to champion a lot of these techniques to solve a lot of these problems, not only at the compliance level, but also kind of at the core engineering and infrastructure level.
Hey, Armani, one of the themes over the last few months has been now that Trump has won the election, and it's widely seen here in the U.S. to be a much friendlier environment to crypto companies post-January 20th. What are your plans in the U.S.?
Yeah, so we started our U.S. team and started going after all 50 state MTLs even before the election was over. I'm an American. I've spent the majority of my life in the U.S. It's a really important market to me. With that said, we really strategically decided to focus our business internationally. So we've been acquiring licenses in Dubai, here in Japan, I'm in Tokyo right now, and most recently in Europe. And with the Trump administration, and I think with all of the kind of overwhelming excitement that the industry has, we're super excited about moving a lot of our core businesses back into the U.S. and really focusing on it more broadly.
Hey, very briefly, we just have 20 seconds, Armani. Are you worried at all about the tarnishing of the FTX brand and the way that people think about it here in the U.S. and around the world? Very briefly.
It's hard to not be worried about something like that. These are super serious problems. But I think with every collapse and with every failure, there's a lot of lessons learned. And it's not about focusing on the failures of the past, but really focusing on how we can improve and take steps forward.
Backpack Exchange CEO Armani Ferrante, thanks so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. That is going to do it for Bloomberg Crypto. Join us again, though, next week with another new episode of Bloomberg Crypto.